6 months. That's what the showrunner says they spent building this thing. And it bought the most important episode of this era of Star Trek. 6 months of work on one episode running alongside everything else the show still had to shoot with a whole crew hired that this production didn't have before. Which is insane because from the outside, the answer is a joke. It's a bit. The crew turns into puppets. It took me until the last 10 minutes to figure out what it was actually for. And once I saw it, I couldn't stop seeing it. Everybody's arguing about whether they should have done this. I want to know why they'd bother. What's up, my know-it-alls? Okay, before anything else, I have to put something on the table. Because if I don't say it, it'll sit underneath everything that I'm going to say today. I love puppets. Not as a bit, as an art form, okay? I wanted to be a puppeteer when I was a kid. I had a puppet growing up. I own a professional grade one right now. And the only reason you didn't just watch me use it is that it looks real close enough to Ernie that I'd rather not have that conversation with somebody's legal department. So, you know what that makes me? I'm the exact person this episode was built for, and nobody involved knew I existed. I'm not neutral. I'm the mark, which means me telling you I liked it is worth nothing, and it shouldn't be worth anything. So if the argument only works because I like felt, it isn't an argument, and I'd rather find that out on camera than pretend otherwise. I've got more on the puppet thing than belongs in here, and I go into it in this week's sidebar video for members. If that's your thing, I hope you'll join me over there. Here's the part I'd rather skip. When this was announced, I wasn't charitable about it either. My honest first reaction was the same one you probably had, which was, what are they doing? Okay, I've been at this long enough to know that reaction is usually laziness wearing a costume, and it really was. When I watched it, first 40 minutes, I'm saying, oh, this is stupid out loud, more than once. Somewhere in the back half, for me anyway, it flips, and I'm going, okay, that's actually kind of clever. And the premise is still ridiculous. Then the last 10 minutes happened, and I sat back and went, oh. I'm not asking you to skip to the end of that, okay? I went through the whole thing, but the part that got me first had nothing to do with the story. It was the money. These aren't Amazon puppets, all right? Be specific with me here, because the word puppet is doing damage. And people are picturing a sock, okay? What's on screen is full Muppet grade construction, okay? The end credit card reads, Puppets by Jim Henson Creature Shop, not the Jim Henson Company, not Jim Henson Studios, not the Jim Henson Workshop, all three of which I've watched go out and print this week. It's the Creature Shop, and TrekCore reported they didn't just build these, they operated them. Now, I have a friend who works at the Puppetry Center here in Atlanta. He restores old Sesame Street and Muppet puppets. He builds costumes for Macy's parades. He's one of the foremost mascot suit builders working, and he's classically Henson trained, which means a specific process that shop has been running for decades, and it produces a very specific looking object. You can spot it across a room. Nobody's published a budget for this, okay? I went looking, actually looking, and there isn't anything out there. So I can't tell you what it costs. What I can tell you is what my friend charges, and a completed puppet or mascot suit runs somewhere between $6,000 and $10,000, depending on the internals. Working arms, hand ability, wiring, whatever. Now, go count the puppets in this episode. And that's just what's sitting on the shelf when you show up. Here's the problem with counting puppets, which is that the puppets aren't the expensive part. The thing that made me sit forward is the part you can't see. It's the floor. When you shoot puppets on a standing set, the performer has to physically be somewhere. Now, normally you do that with a recessed set, which means either you cut the floor open and carve a clear path for the puppeteer to move through, or you rebuild the floor sections and lift the whole thing into risers. Now, I'm not telling you that's what they did here because nobody really has said, and I'm not going to invent it for you. That's how this is normally accomplished. And there's no cheap version of it. On a standing set, on an ongoing series, that still has to shoot every other episode. Which is why the 6 months doesn't surprise me. Henry Alonzo Meyer said easily more than 6 months of work, and that they had to staff an entire crew of puppeteers on top of the crew they already had. Goldsman said that alongside every normal prep meeting for every episode, there was always a separate puppet meeting. And that's where the word people keep using falls apart on me. A gimmick is a hook. A hook exists to go get you an audience you haven't got. Strange New World has 5 more episodes after this one, and then a final season that's only 6, and then it's finished, okay? Goldsman called that last season a 6-episode goodbye that walks these people to their known future. There's nobody left to hook. Whatever this is, the word doesn't describe it because the motive names it, that ultimately it stopped existing a while ago, which is also why the dare doesn't bother me. Anson Mount has said the whole thing started as a dare that the cast threw at the writers, and if they've spent any time on a set, you know exactly why that's true. Somebody hands you a word, you have to work into an episode. Somebody bets you can't. That's what the crew does to stay awake in month 4. The dare is how it started. 6 months is what happened afterward, and only one of those things is on screen. So the money isn't chasing an audience, and it isn't an accident, which left me with the other easy answer, which is that it's a stunt, a swing for the sake of swinging. And I really couldn't make that one work either. Star Trek has done this since the very beginning, and it isn't close, okay? The original series has an episode called Shore Leave, where the crew lands on a planet that manifests whatever they're thinking about, okay? And one of the things it manifests is a giant white rabbit.
Oh, my paws and whiskers! I'll be late.
That's a man in a rabbit suit. And the show doesn't wink at you. It plays it dead straight as an actual enormous rabbit. Alice in Wonderland and everything. And this franchise absorbed it without a scratch. Bring it up now, and what you get back is, well, that was the era. Right. And you accepted it. Not because the effect held up, because it doesn't. You accepted it because the episode was about something, and the rabbit was ultimately how you got there. Data got 2 dreams, and they weren't a stunt then either. Birthright in 93, where his father shows up as a blacksmith hammering a bird's wing. Then Phantasms 8 months later. The cellular peptide cake with mint frosting, same writer both times, Brandon Braga, and the second one was directed by Patrick Stewart. That's a production putting real money and its lead actor behind the idea that the inside of a character's head is a location worth building. And really, that's the well-known one, but go back further than that, because the deepest cut here is also the oldest. The very first Star Trek anybody ever shot, before Kirk existed, is The Cage. And it's Telosians putting Pike inside illusions built out of his own wants and running through them in order. Duty, homesickness, desire. They reused that footage in the Menagerie in 66, and that 2-parter won the Hugo the next year. And what the illusion is unpacking in the Menagerie is Spock. It's Spock's career ultimately ending his career-ending loyalty to Pike, delivered entirely as a story inside a story. The first Hugo this franchise ever won was for using an interior projection to say something about Spock. That's not an argument. It's just a pretty funny thing to be true. And Discovery did it to the exact same character 7 years ago. If memory serves, Spock's mind is scrambled and it's Telosian's projection again who put him back together. The one I went looking for and didn't expect is Enterprise. 2002, an episode called Vanishing Point. Hoshi gets transported off of a planet during a storm, starts going invisible, then intangible, and watches the crew move on without her. And at the end, you find out the whole hour happened in 8.3 seconds inside the pattern buffer. A transporter accident, okay? You catching me? That turns out to have been an entire interior event 24 years ago. And you're not going to find one person who's mentioning it this week. So, if you want to say you don't want this level of absurdity in your Star Trek, that's a real position, and I've got no argument for that. Okay? That's taste, and taste is allowed, but the franchise has always gone here. And the tradition has exactly one rule, and it's got nothing to do with how silly the frame is. The frame has to have something in it. Break the format and put nothing inside it, and you've made a stunt. Break it and load it, and you've made what I've started calling a loaded frame, which is the only kind worth doing. That's the actual test. That's the only test. And it's the test that I couldn't get this episode to fail. I've been rattling off some really deep lore cuts for a minute now, so forgive me for that. And if that's your thing, I've got a partner over at our sister channel, Lore Reloaded, where he gets into the deep cut Star Trek lore, the systems, the military concepts, the adjacent exploratory stuff, the things that a Star Trek fan can really dig into. He's the lore, I'm the craft. He's the guy who can tell you what a Telosian is and ultimately where they've been since '64. And I'm the guy who wants to know what it costs to put one on the soundstage. If that's the part of Star Trek you actually love, well, that's your door. There's a link. And if you're sitting there with strong opinions about canon, go pick a fight with him about it. He likes it a lot more than he lets on. But I'm the craft guy, which means I had to find out what was in there. What's in there is Spock, and it's been in there all season. Strange New Worlds is going to go down as Spock's college years. That's the frame that I keep landing on. It's the experimentation era, okay? The stretch where you break it off with the fiance back home because you want to know what else is out there. And you try things, and some of them are embarrassing, and eventually you come back around recognizable. This season's been waking him back up. It's walking him back, if you will, 3 times. Now, not 3 in a row, but 3 separate times. Episode 1, watch him in the conference room. He's colder, more analytical than we've seen him, to the point where I think people are cracking jokes around him, and he doesn't get them, and he really doesn't pretend to. And I'll be straight with you, nobody wrote about that. All right, I went and read the premiere coverage, and Spock effectively, he ain't in it. That's my read, not a reported one, and I'd rather tell you which it is than let you assume. Episode 2, the horror episode, is the one you can point at. T'Pring shows up as an apparition and goes straight at his Vulcan identity, ties him down in the sickbay, starts taking his ears off, and get the direction right because everybody inverts it. She isn't making him more Vulcan. She's making him more human. Now, the way out is a meditative logic exercise, so he escapes using the most Vulcan tool he owns, and in the episode itself, the cutting is something he's doing to himself. That's a character being told in horror movie grammar. That's the thing eating him is ultimately inside the house. Now, the one that doesn't fit, and I'm really trying to name it on purpose. Episode 4, okay? Spock's barely in it. And his one real beat is dismissing La'an's concern about the probe. Okay, in an episode that's entirely about how the dismissed instinct was correct. I sat that one out, and I'll tell you why. It was fine. It just didn't leave me with much to say that wasn't me defending an alien world built to mimic an Earth institution on a premise that was contrived the second you looked at it. Fine for what it was. I'm just not going to spend 15 minutes defending a lazy premise, so I moved on. I cover every one of these the day it airs. The other half of that arrangement is that when I've got nothing, I don't show up and say it anyway, which is exactly why I'm not going to turn around now and pretend episode 4 supports me. If you only ever show people the episodes that fit, you're not describing a pattern, you're building one. If that's the arrangement you want, do me a favor, subscribe, okay? So that's 2. But the third one is the reason I wanted to talk to you today and to explain why it hit me the way it did. I have to tell you about a conversation I had at a convention. I met Ethan Peck there. My wife swooned, that's her business, but we got a real conversation out of it. And what stuck with me is the difference between him and Anson Mount. Mount's an actor's actor, okay? This is a job. I do it as well as I can. I love the work. Peck is something else. Peck loves Star Trek and loves playing Spock in a way you can hear across a table. So when he says at CCXP in Mexico this spring that they're working to turn this more emotional Spock into the more computational analytical Spock, you know from the original series, I don't hear a press line. I hear the guy. He got 4 years to play the fun version, and now he gets to turn the corner into the one everybody's been waiting on. And the show knows exactly where that corner leads, which is the part I think gets lost. Goldsman said in July that by the time we get to Amok Time, Spock and T'Pring's relationship is not where we left it. Then he said, every coloring book has lines, and the lines of ours are where we end up. Amok Time aired in 67. It's been sitting at the end of this the whole time like a wall, and everything they do with these two between now and then is them deciding how she gets from here to there. And that's the part that reframes the whole season for me. This isn't a show doing a bit. It's a show spending its last year putting a character back where it found him, one episode at a time. And this is the one where it finishes, which brings us to the last 10 minutes. He wakes up. Spock wakes up in his own quarters, and T'Pring is there to meet him, and she isn't a puppet, and she never was. There was a transporter accident, but what it damaged was his shuttle and some buoys. That's it. Everybody turning into felt happened inside his head while he was unconscious. Here's my first reaction, and it's the thing I need to be very careful with. My gut went, oh, that makes so much sense. Now the insanity makes sense. And I felt every problem I had with that hour evaporate. That's a dangerous sentence, and I know it, because a twist that shows up at minute 50 and retroactively excuses everything in front of it, that's a cheat, okay? That's the definition of one. And there's a real complaint out there that the show runs out of things to do with the puppets well before the hour's up. And the reveal doesn't make that complaint go away. So let me say it more carefully than my gut said it. The dream doesn't forgive the silly hour. It tells you what the silly hour was in service to. But stay with me, because this is the part that moved me. Look at what he does in there. Somebody tells him flat out that this situation can't be met with logic, that the hijinks aren't the obstacle, they're the solution. Spock says, I know what to do. And what he does is take the captain's chair and shut off the life support to knock the boarding party unconscious. That's a cold, ruthless, completely Vulcan calculation. He doesn't abandon logic to win in there. He needed the chaos in order to use it. Then he wakes up and tells her that in that state, she taught him how to face anxiety and accept illogical things. And she tells him, well, that's a relief, because that's exactly why she came aboard in the first place. That's literally what she was there to help him with. And the same conversation asked whether he still wants to go back to a life of logic. And he says, very much so. Little can make one crave order and logic more than being surrounded by puppets. Both of those minutes apart, he learned to sit with the illogical and wants order more than he did before. That's not a contradiction. That's a man who's proved to himself he can survive the chaos and picks logic anyway, which is a completely different thing from hiding behind it. And I know what some of you are already typing. He's Spock. He was always going to end up there. Canon says so. Sure. But canon tells you where he lands. It doesn't tell you he chose it. That's the corner. And they put it inside a puppet show. Which finally answers the thing I couldn't work out at the top. Back to the 6 months. They hired a crew they didn't have. They built puppets that cost what a used car costs, one at a time. Somebody almost certainly cut into a standing set that has to keep shooting, and they spent all of it so that one man could work something out in his sleep and wake up knowing who he wants to be. That ratio is insane, and it's the whole answer. Nobody spends that to land a joke because there's no audience left to sell the joke to. You spend it because the silly frame is the only place you can put a quiet decision that big without the show turning into a lecture about it. That's what it was for. A loaded frame, and it's the oldest trick this franchise has. And the thing that almost cost me this episode wasn't the puppets. It was a habit I'd fallen into without noticing, which is asking whether a show was allowed to do a thing instead of asking what the thing did. That question feels like criticism. It isn't. It's a permission slip. And it will stop you at the door of every interesting episode ever made. There you go. Now you know. And if knowing is half the battle, you're halfway to being know-it-all yourself. What's the know-it-all index for? Strange New Worlds, level 5 transporter accident. 2 numbers went into this and they didn't agree, so I'm going to show you both. As production, I would say it's a 9, and I won't be argued down. The build, the performance, the staging, the logistics of getting a puppeteer crew inside a standing set on a show that still has to make its schedule, and doing it well enough that a lifelong puppet guy sat there counting gags instead of seams. As an hour of story, it's probably closer to a 7. And it sags in the middle. That reveal is carrying more than a reveal should have to. And I said so before I said anything nice. Literally anything nice about it at all. And I'm not rounding up because I had a good time. So it lands really, I think where it actually lands is probably at an 8 out of 10. They cut the floor open for a character beat. That's crazy. All right, your turn, and give me the real answer. What's the format break you wrote off before you watched it and were wrong about? The musical, the animated one, noir, it doesn't matter, which show even, or which franchise. Tell me the one you were wrong about. I'll go first in the comments. Playlists are on the end screen. Season 4 of Strange New Worlds is there. The X-Men show is there. And if you've never watched me outside of franchise, the third one, that's where I'd start. Lore Reload is down there too. Tell him Mr. Know-It-All sent you. And Saturday, we're getting into Vision Quest. I've been through the trailer. I've been through the interviews. And as a production guy, I've got thoughts, plus a prediction or two that I'd like on the record. So I'll see you on Saturday. All right, guys, until then, never forget, everyone loves a know-it-all. Bye, guys.